The European Union missed a key opportunity to take a tougher stance against Putin and confront Russian aggression more decisively. That is the message of an editorial published by The Telegraph, which argues that Europe's strong rhetoric in support of Ukraine has not been matched by real financial commitments. The paper notes that at every stage of the war, from defending Kyiv to sinking Russia's flagship cruiser Moskva, Ukraine has repeatedly proved it can fight effectively despite limited resources. According to the editorial, had Western countries fully backed Ukraine at the very start of Russia's full-scale invasion, the situation today could look very different. While praising Ukraine's recent successes, including a strike on a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker in the Mediterranean, the paper stressed that isolated actions are not enough without sustained support. It describes the EU's 90 billion euros loan to Ukraine as only a partial victory and calls the failure to mobilize 210 billion euros in frozen Russian assets a missed chance for Europe to show a leadership and take a firmer line against Moscow. The United Kingdom has dropped its own plan to transfer frozen Russian assets to Ukraine after a similar initiative by the European Union collapsed. According to the Financial Times, the proposal involved around 9 billion euros held in British banks. Prime Minister Keir Starmer had backed the idea of using the assets to finance defense purchases for Ukraine, but London decided not to move alone. British officials say the plan was always meant to be coordinated with the EU, Canada and Australia, and once Brussels stepped back, the UK followed suit. The decision comes as Kyiv warned that without additional support, it could face serious financial strain by early 2026. British officials insist support for Ukraine remains firm. Chancellor Rachel Reeves said the UK is urgently working with partners on alternative funding options, including redirecting around $2 billion in guarantees for World Bank lending to cover Ukraine's immediate needs. The UK also maintains a standing commitment of 3.4 billion euros a year in military aid. Officials acknowledge, however, that banks have raised concerns over legal risk linked to the use of Russian assets. At the same time, Starmer has authorized the transfer of 2.85 billion euros in frozen proceeds from the sale of Chelsea, formerly owned by Roman Abramovich, to Ukraine, underlying that London is seeking alternative, less legally risky ways to support Kyiv. US intelligence says that Putin has not changed his military goals. He still aims to take full control of Ukraine and holds broader ambitions toward Europe, according to source cited by Reuters. The assessment, last updated in late September, contradicts claims by the White House that Moscow is seeking to end the war. US officials say these conclusions have remained consistent since Russia launched its full-scale invasion in 2022 and align with the views of European intelligence services, while Washington acknowledges progress in talks but warns the road to peace remains long. Ukraine's military intelligence chief Kyrylo Budanov says there are only two areas where Ukraine is critically dependent on the United States. Speaking to the Ukrainian paper LB, Budanov explained that the first is satellite intelligence, including radar and optical imagery. He said Ukraine receives parts of this data free of charge as an assistant, while the rest comes through contracts. Losing free access would be difficult but manageable, cutting optional imagery by around 15 to 17% and radar data about 46%. However, if the US were to block contracts, Ukraine would lose almost all capability in this area, making the dependence critical. The second area of reliance is early warning of ballistic missile threats, but that's it. Everything else we provided ourselves, Budanov said. Russia's economy is showing clear signs of strain under the weight of war and sanctions, despite Kremlin efforts to project stability. Export revenues, particularly from oil and gas, have fallen well below pre-war levels, while the budget deficit has widened to around 5.7 trillion rubles, roughly 3% of GDP, far exceeding initial plans. Against this backdrop, Russia's central bank cut its key interest rate to 16% in an attempt to support an increasingly fragile economy. Central Bank Governor Elvira Nabiullina said inflation is slowing and has already dropped below 6%, with a price growth expected to be the the lowest in 5 years by the end of the year. At the same time, she acknowledged that upcoming VAT hikes and regulated price increases will put additional pressure on inflation, with their full impact still unclear. As sanctions bite and external revenues decline, Russia is raising taxes, including a planned VAT increases from 20 to 22% in 2026 and issuing new government bonds at high interest rates. Investment has fallen to its lowest level in 5 years, signaling a loss of businesses' confidence. Despite official claims of a strong ruble, the currency's resilience is largely the result of tight monetary policy, high rates and restricted imports rather than genuine economic strength. Ukraine's strike on Russian oil infrastructure have added further pressure, triggering fuel shortages and long lines at gas stations in several regions. While Moscow speaks of a return to balanced growth, real economic indicators remain close to stagnation, forcing the central bank to maintain a tough policy and shifting the cost of the war onto households and businesses.
Today, we decided to lower the key rate to 16% per annum. Inflation is slowing in November, even somewhat faster than we expected. This was due not only to persistent factors, but also, to a significant extent, to one-off factors. At the same time, in the coming months, prices will be significantly impacted by increases in VAT and regulated prices. We have yet to assess their final impact. We are taking all of this into account when choosing the speed and scale of the rate reduction.
In a basement just steps away from Kyiv's Maidan Square, Ukrainian street artist Maxim Kilderov has created a space where war is not explained, it is felt. Scorched metal, torn fabric, and personal debris fill the room, remnants of the life interrupted by Russia's invasion. Rocket launcher tubes sit beside a Russian intelligence officer's diary. Russian uniforms hang from darkened walls. Thousands of military patches, symbols of unit pride, defiance, and dark humor, cover display boards on bursts of color. Kilderov spent 55 days under Russian occupation in Novokakhovka. What began as a few objects kept at home slowly turned into a dense, unofficial archive of the war, built from battlefield recoveries, trades with the soldiers, and items collected after nightly air attacks on Ukrainian cities. There are captured Russian documents and passports, helmets, weapons fragments, knives, grenades, and night vision equipment. Above it all hangs a Shahed decoy drone made of a styrofoam designed to exhaust Ukraine's air defenses. Among the most personal items are small things: a smartphone pierced by a shrapnel that saved a soldier's life, half-empty cigarette packs, soldiers' drawings, unit flags from Black Sea operations. At the center is a 5-meter painting called 55, a maze of lines and signs marking the number of days he lived under occupation, when he volunteered, resisted, live-streamed live under Russian control, and painted abandoned Russian vehicles in acts of defiance. Today, the basement is invitation only, but soldiers continue to arrive, bringing new artifacts and new stories, expanding what Kilderov sees as a raw record of Russia's light reality and a reminder of the unity forged in the darkest days of the war.
This painting is called 55. It represents the number of days I spent under occupation, when my friends and I volunteered, helped others, resisted, and went out to protests. It depicts a city under occupation, and when I was evacuated, I managed to take it with me.
That's all for now. For more content, please subscribe.